Falling in love is not really a choice, it's just something that happens to you. It hits you like thunder. It can be beautiful when that love is reciprocated. Some people call it even the closest thing to magic. But in some cases, a person falls in love with you and you don't return that affection. It can even become an unhealthy obsession to obtain what is out of your grasp. An obsession that even your death can't escape or end. Your mind might have traveled to a peaceful place, but your body is trapped in the arms of the man who is obsessed with you, and you won't escape him for 7 long years. That could not stop his love. Hi everyone, and welcome to a new video. As you can see, I have some spooky stuff behind me. Normally I don't have these things inside my house, but I'm gonna have a Halloween party this month. So I already ordered a lot of stuff and I thought it was fun to use it for my Halloween themed videos. So, as I kind of already spoiled for you, this is one of my Halloween videos and this will be the first one, which will be released in the beginning of October. So if you're watching this, it's already spooky season. And I'm really happy to say that I have at least 2 videos for you this spooky season. Normally I have only 1, but now I have 2 of them. Maybe even 3, but I won't promise anything. So for this spooky season, we are gonna begin with a very disturbing and morbid story. And that's really an understatement. If you haven't watched my other Halloween videos, I've made a list where you can find all of them. So you can also watch them after you've watched this video. I will put them in the description. It includes the origins of Halloween, the story of the Flying Dutchman, which wasn't really a Halloween video, but it is one of the themes. And a video about vampires. And another being that's kind of related to vampires is gonna be the next video for this spooky season. So go check that out if you love spookiness. For this video I wanted to discuss a real life story that gave me so many shivers. I heard about this story many years ago, I think in 2017. It was a video from Kendall Ray, so you can also check that one out if you'd like. And I was really intrigued by it. It's really very disturbing, as I already mentioned before. But every Halloween it pops back up in my mind and I really wanted to share it with you all. I just can't understand why people can act the way they do in some cases, especially in this one. It's so disturbing but yet also very interesting. If you're easily scared or triggered, it's better to skip this video and watch another one. I will talk about desecration of a corpse, about mental instability and about war. So if you think that subjects like that aren't your thing, please skip this video and you can check out another video of mine. And I see you the next time. This story is about a German radiology technologist who was so obsessed with his patient that not even her death could keep him away from her. Meet Karl Tänzler, the man who lived with a corpse. Karl Tänzler was born as Georg Karl Tänzler on February the 8th, 1877 in Dresden, Germany. He grew up in the German Empire, which was also known as the Second Reich, and he lived there his whole childhood. And during his childhood he experienced strange dreams. He was visited by a dead ancestor named Countess Anna Constantia von Cosel. He claimed that in these dreams she showed him the face of his one true love who he hadn't met yet, and he would never forget these strange dreams. It would haunt him even into his adulthood. Karl studied at the medical university and he moved to Australia just before the First World War started. He wanted to collect equipment and suitable boats and become acquainted with the weather and sea conditions so that he could travel further to the South Sea Islands. Eventually he became interested in engineering and in electrical work, so he stayed there for 10 years. During his stay there, the First World War broke out, and since he was a German citizen, he was placed in a concentration camp by the British military. They claimed that it was for safekeeping, but that was probably not the true reason. He was placed alongside Chinese and Indian prisoners of war, so that probably explains what you need to know. Eventually, he was relocated to Trial Bay in a castle-like prison on the cliffs. He had to stay there until the end of the war. No prisoner was allowed to return to their former residence, so he was forced to be shipped off to the prisoner exchange in Holland. After that exchange, he was released and he set out to find his mother. He had not seen or spoken with her since the beginning of the war. Eventually he found her and he stayed with her for 3 years. During that time, around 1920, he met his wife, whose name was Doris Schaffer, and together they had 2 daughters, Ayesha Tänzler and Clarissa Tänzler. Post-war Europe was a mess. There was chaos and hardly any prospects, especially in Germany, because they were forced to take the blame of the whole war, and they also had to pay a lot of money which they didn't have. So therefore Karl was looking for another place to live, and his mother advised him to move to Florida because his sister was already living there, which made the choice easier. He traveled to Rotterdam on February the 6th, 1926 and sailed to Havana in Cuba. From there he settled in Sapphire Hills in Florida, which was the same place where his sister also lived, and his family would follow him a year later. When he submitted the documents for his US citizenship, he changed his name from Karl Tänzler to Karl Tänzler von Cosel, since he always claimed that he was a descendant of the Countess von Cosel ever since his childhood dreams. Eventually, he left his family in Sapphire Hills to take a job as a radiology technician at the US Marine Hospital in Key West, Florida. Little did he know that within 3 years, he would finally meet the woman that he had seen in his dreams. But who was this woman? And why did she cross his path? Her name was Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos. She was the daughter of a Cuban-American cigar maker who was also located in Key West, Florida. She was 17 years old when she married her husband Louis Mesa in 1926. They tried to have a baby, but sadly Elena had a miscarriage. This caused their marriage to fall apart, and eventually Louis moved to Miami and Elena stayed in Key West. You think this was enough misery, but shortly after this all, Elena would become very ill. She was diagnosed with tuberculosis. When you suffer from tuberculosis, your lungs or other tissues are infected, and nowadays it's very easily treatable, especially in wealthy countries, but back then it was really fatal. Elena knew she had to be treated, and this is when she decided to go to the US Marine Hospital in Key West. And this is where the story truly starts. Elena was 20 years old when she entered the hospital, and Karl was 53 years old. He already lived more than half of his life, and Elena just started adulthood. When he saw her, it was as if he was struck by lightning. Could it be true? Was this the woman of his vision? Was this vision even real? But she looked exactly like the woman he had seen in his dreams. This had to be his one true love. But she was ill and she could die. He could not let this happen. Although he was specialized in radiology, he was adamant to cure Elena. At first, she was really happy that someone was so eager to cure her. Karl even brought X-ray equipment into her home to try to treat her. But it would not take long before she would notice Karl's true intentions. Poor Elena already had to suffer from her illness, and now she also had to suffer his obsession with her. For the next 18 months, he would shower her with gifts, like jewels and clothing. And eventually he confessed his love for her, even though he was still married and Elena was also still legally married. We do not know if she loved him back, but it's most likely that she was a little bit scared by this all and that she felt helpless and very uncomfortable. Because on one hand he wanted to help her and he wanted to do everything in his power to cure her, but on the other hand he was really obsessed with her, which was really unhealthy and also for her must have been very difficult. Especially since Karl could have been her father if you look at his age. There was nothing she could do but wait and hope that she would survive this horrific ordeal. But Elena would not be cured. She succumbed to her illness on October the 25th, 1931, when she was only 22 years old. She died at her parents' home. Karl was inconsolable. After all these years, he finally found the woman of his dreams, only to be taken away from him. You would think that the story would stop here. After all, she had passed to the other side. But Karl wanted to do something for the love of his life. He decided to pay for her funeral and bought a very pricey stone mausoleum in Key West Cemetery for her remains. Of course, he asked her family for permission first, which he was granted. But they could not visit the mausoleum whenever they wanted, because there was only one key. And that key belonged to Karl. And they had no idea that Karl had that one and only key in his possession. For the next 2 years, Karl visited Elena every evening. He sang Spanish songs for her and he claimed to speak with Elena's spirits. She would ask him to take her from her grave so that she could be closer to him. After these 2 years, his visits suddenly stopped. This was very surprising to Elena's relatives. He was so devoted to her, and now he didn't even come to the mausoleum anymore. And this was not the only odd thing, because he was also fired from the hospital. All because he was creeping everybody out with his dead patient obsession. Although it was suspicious, it would take 7 years before they could unveil the truth. Before the family uncovers the truth, I will uncover it for you. Karl did not lose interest for Elena, not at all. The only thing he lost was his patience. He became dissatisfied with his nightly visits. He was yearning for more quality time, and perhaps that's why he heard Elena's voice asking him to take her with him. So one night he decided to act on it. On an evening in April 1933, he took a toy trolley with him and placed the rapidly decaying body on it. He transported her body to his lab, which was located inside an old airplane. The body was in a very bad shape because it was already decomposing for at least 2 years. He had to be creative in order to keep the body together. He secured her limbs to her torso with piano wire, replaced her decaying skin with silk soaked in wax and plaster. He fashioned a wig from the hair that had fallen out of her skull and that he had obtained from her mother. He doused her in disinfectant and perfume to cover the odor of her rotting flesh, which must have smelled terrible. He gave her glass eyes and he filled her up with rags to maintain her shape. Before I go on, I want to say that I really feel terrible that I have to talk about Elena like she is some sort of doll or a toy. She was a human being with a very short life, and now she's only known for the horrors that her body has been through. I really feel very, very sorry for her. Perhaps she didn't even know it because she was already on the other side, and I really truly hope that's the case, because I can't imagine what I would feel like if somebody would do this to my body when I died. Even though I might not even know it. It's just a horrible thought. So let's also remember Elena, how she was. And not only for her flesh and bones. That being said, this was not all that Karl did to her. He dressed her up in beautiful clothes and he had to keep doing procedures to her body in order to keep her from decaying even further. And the smell was something he had to get used to, because no matter what he did to her body when it comes to perfumes or other odors, this scent was so strong, it was really not gonna be unnoticeable. He installed a curtain cloth veil to separate his part of the bedside from hers, because yes, Elena would be sleeping with him. He kept her in his bed and he would sleep next to her every night for 7 long years. After all these years, all the questions that people had started piling up. Why did Karl buy so many women's clothing when he's not even living with his wife? Or why does Karl not visit the mausoleum anymore? At one point, a local boy walked across Karl's window and he saw him dancing with what appeared to be a life-size doll, which caused suspicion. Some people even claimed that the doll was the body of Elena. Since the family already questions his weird behavior many years before, Elena's sister Florinda finally took the step to confront Karl. She went to his house in October 1940 and to her own surprise he opened the door and invited her inside. She went inside and she observed her surroundings. Then suddenly her whole body froze. Her eyes fell on what she thought was a wax figure of her sister. Of course, this creeped her out and she notified the authorities. They seized the doll, but to their horror, they discovered it was not a doll at all. It was the rotting corpse of Elena. Karl was arrested and charged with wantonly and maliciously destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization, which does not even include what he did to her body, which is bizarre. This trial became a media sensation. You would think that people would feel disgusted by this whole event, but there were people who felt sympathy for Karl. They thought that he was a hopeless romantic and they found it very cute. Before he had to stand trial, Karl had to go to a psychiatric evaluation and the conclusion was that he was competent to stand trial. Even though he claimed that he wanted to take Elena high to the stratosphere so that the radiation from outer space could restore her to life, which was of course a delusional idea. But it was better that he was competent, because then he would get a proper trial. Or so you would think so. On October the 9th, 1940, the preliminary hearing took place. This is a hearing to see if there is enough evidence to prosecute the accused. And after this hearing, the trial needed to be planned. However, the case was eventually dropped due to the statute of limitation which had expired. And this is really mind-blowing and frustrating to me, because he would never ever have to answer for his crimes. And that's really the final blow for Elena and for her relatives. But that's not even the real final blow, because matters were gonna get even worse. Elena's body was put on public display in a local funeral home shortly after this whole ordeal. And this happened because the trial became very well known and popular throughout Florida, and I guess they just wanted to profit from it. And I'm sure that her family got none of it. But we have to keep in mind that these were different times with different rules, and they weren't really respectful to bodies as we are right now, which can be better sometimes, but okay. But surely things like this wouldn't be allowed anymore. Nearly 7,000 people came to see her rotting corpse with all the adjustments that Karl had made. Some people and even some physicians who examined the body claimed that there was even a vaginal tube placed in the vaginal area. And I think I don't have to explain to you what it was used for. You can use your own imagination, or better, don't use your imagination, because it's disgusting. However, this was not noticeable during Elena's public display, so I really hope that this is just some sensational story which isn't true. It just makes me really sick when I think about it. Eventually, when the hype fizzled out, Elena was finally allowed to be brought to her final resting place. She was reburied in an unmarked grave to make sure that she would finally find her peace, her body, and also her soul. So back to Karl. He was a free man and he faced no consequences. His reputation was probably ruined, but I don't think that he really cared about it, because he also didn't care about respecting someone else's body. He even got the nerves to ask for Elena's body back, but thank to God he was refused. 4 years after the trial, he moved to Pasco Country in Florida, which was actually really close to his wife and child in Sapphire Hills. And yes, he only had one child left because one of his daughters, Clarissa, had died of diphtheria in 1934. And his wife Doris even helped to support him in his later years, which I think is really sad because he neglected her for so long, and yet she still remains loyal to him. He even wrote an autobiography called Fantastic Adventures. While he was living on his own in his own house, he ordered a death mask to be made of Elena's face so that he could use it as companion. Unfortunately, his obsession did not go with Elena to her unmarked grave. Some stories even claim that he had a life-size wax doll in her image, and that he used that doll the same way as he used the corpse of Elena. He lived with the doll until he died on July the 3rd, 1952, at the age of 75. One thing I was glad to hear was that he died on the floor and he was only discovered 3 weeks later, which kind of meant that nobody really cared to check if he was okay, which is a small victory for Elena. Of course, stories like this have their own conspiracy theories. There are stories that claim that he died in the arms of his Elena doll, but that's a very romantic spin on it, and I really hope that it isn't true because he doesn't deserve it. Another theory is that Elena's body was returned to Karl in some kind of way. They switched her body with another corpse and Karl was able to live with her corpse until his death. I think this theory can't be true because they would have found her corpse alongside his dead remains, and I don't think that they would keep that a secret because that would be big news. Then there is also a story that was published in Pulp magazine. This was published 3 years following his death, which added new details to the case. One renovation worker claimed that he had found a letter in which Karl confessed to have killed Elena. The letter was even quoted and said, "She died because I gave this to her mercifully. I mixed the roots of wolfsbane, monkshood, with aconite diluted. It was palatable, and my loved one departed this miserable world on October the 25th, 1931. Suffer no more, sweet Elena. I have sent you to the angels with my golden elixir." Karl also claimed that he would kill Elena if it meant that that would fulfill his destiny. But no evidence has been found. So this was the story of Karl Tänzler and his obsession with Elena De Hoyos. It makes me so mad that he was able to do all these things to her without any respect for her or her body. I'm not really easily disgusted by anything, but this really makes me sick to my stomach. But I feel strange about this story because I really want to talk about it and tell people about it, but I also feel disgusted But I also feel intrigued because I always wonder why people do things like this. Are you born like this, or are events in your life the reason why you've become a monster? It's really interesting, and we'll probably never know the true answer. We can't look inside his head, and we can't really believe everything that comes out of his mouth. I don't know what I believe, what happens when you die, but for Elena's sake, I really hope that there was or is a heaven where she went to directly after she died, so that she could never ever see, hear, experience what Karl did to her body. So for her sake, I really hope the heaven is a real place. As for Karl, I hope that there is a hell where he will rot forever and ever and ever, and he will never see Elena because she is in heaven, a place where he will never be. I feel like a very evil person when I say all these things, but it's Halloween, so it suits the occasion. So that's it for today. I really hope that you found this story interesting. I won't say that you like this story because it's not really a funny or a happy tale to tell. But it's important to tell it because hopefully nobody will ever do such a thing again. For Halloween, I still have at least one video in store for you, which will be about werewolves, because this one was requested. And the video about werewolves will be released on the 31st of October. So stay tuned for that one. It's really a cool one. I did a lot of research. I've tackled almost everything. It took me hours, so I really hope that you're gonna watch it as well. For now, thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, give a thumbs up. If you liked even more, you can also subscribe to my channel. That would mean the world to me. I've gained a lot of new subscribers and I'm really happy that it's going so well, because it was really dead for a long time. So at least I'm not doing it for nothing. And I really hope to see you the next time. Have a very nice spooky season and a happy Halloween, and I see you the 31st. Bye.